Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Where Do You Work? Evaluation from an Indigenous Place-Based Perspective presentation presented today by Expanding the Bench and Dr. Michelle M. Jacob of Anahuy Mentoring, LLC. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eve Kucharski, and I will be your host today. I am a communication specialist with Expanding the Bench and a content manager, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by my colleagues Angel Villalobos, who is ETB's Advancing Culturally Responsive and Equitable ACE Evaluation Network Associate Project Director, and Nancy Vang, who is ETB's Project Manager. Both of them have been incredibly instrumental in helping to coordinate this event and prepping the content and identifying a speaker. And so I'd like to take a moment to say thank you. And Nancy will also be providing tech support on this call. So if you find yourself needing any help or having trouble, please do not hesitate to privately message her. As you might see by my background image, I am currently in beautiful Seattle, the land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. And as I know that we are all joining the call today from all around the United States and perhaps even outside of the United States, I invite you to introduce yourself, your location, and the name of the Indigenous people, the land of the Indigenous peoples where you reside today. So I will share a tool for you to do that. That will be helpful. And then also there is a resource that Nancy might be able to share as well that just provides a little bit more tools on how to use that. While you do that, I'll share a little bit about Expanding the Bench if you're new to us and why we decided to host this event, which we hope will be the start to a regularly occurring series in 2023. So ETB is an initiative committed to diversifying the field of evaluation and elevating culturally responsive and equitable evaluation, what we call CRIE practice. And because of ongoing injustice, we specifically uplift evaluators who are racially and ethnically diverse through our programming. And we envision a reality where power is distributed to lead change toward justice. However, it was brought to our attention that while CRIE, C-R-E-E, has been designed to center racially and ethnically diverse evaluators who have been historically and or presently underrepresented and marginalized in the U.S., we recognize that Indigenous evaluators and those who practice culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation, or CRIE or CRIE, have not been uplifted in ETB's programming and events in an equitable way. So in recognition of our own gaps in equity work, ETB is committed to supporting CRIE practicing professionals by promoting and engaging in the education of it through events like this one. And we're especially grateful to the guidance and leadership of Dr. Nicole R. Bowman, who coined the term CRIE and who is a member of ETB's Advancing Culturally Responsive and Equitable ACE Evaluation Network, who first introduced us not only to the term, but to the need to expand our understanding and relationship with culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation as an evaluation initiative. And thank you again for your understanding and guidance if you are joining us today on the call. During today's event, Dr. Jacob will present and there will be space for the ETB initiative to ask some questions. And then the final 15 minutes or so of our time today will be open to the audience for you to submit questions in the chat for our presenter to consider and review. Now, before I turn the focus over to Dr. Jacob for today, I'd like to share a question that we'll be revisiting at the end of our presentation. So no need to answer now, but just to keep in your mind. Please consider while you listen, what will you carry forward with you from this presentation, and what insights might you apply from today's conversation in your own work? And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Jacob. Her experience with CRIE is grounded in her Yakama cultural teachings, experience as a leading Indigenous social scientist, and her training and practice and program evaluation among her own Yakama people, diverse Indigenous communities, and in graduate study. Her expertise on Indigenous evaluation spans over 20 years, and she's also an accomplished author of books like The Auntie Way and Fox Doesn't Wear a Watch, Lessons from Mother Nature's Classroom, and many others. ETB is incredibly grateful to have her here with us today for your presentation, Where Do You Work? Understanding Evaluation from an Indigenous Place-Based Perspective. Michelle, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you for unmuting me. And good afternoon, everybody. Michelle Jacob, Yakama. So just introducing myself briefly, as I was taught by my elders. sharing with you a warm greeting and letting you know my name and where I'm from. I'm a member of the Yakama Nation. And behind me, I have the beautiful artwork of Yakama artist Crystal Buck. And this is the book cover to Fox Doesn't Wear a Watch. You see featured prominently in the middle is Patu, Mount Adams, our sacred mountain. We understand through the teachings of our elders that we belong to her and that she is a loving and caring relative who watches over us. And so we have responsibilities to uphold in our people's relationship with her, that we must conduct ourselves in a way that is honorable and respectful. And so we have that built-in accountability and love and generosity that we learn as values that guide what we do, how we think, how we go about conducting ourselves in this world. And those are values that are grounded in our stories and in our rich relationships with place. And that's the heart of what we'll be talking about today together. And so I'm so grateful that you took time out of your day to be here. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I chose to share this beautiful cover of the Auntie Way book that was mentioned. And again, we see Crystal Buck's beautiful artwork. And I love this image because it's such a great reminder of how I would like to address things today. And yes, the people matter a lot. But guess what? The land matters too. Where you are matters, right? And so I think her artwork really beautifully portrays that and helps to teach us that, right? Without any words. And so I think that's a wonderful gift that her artwork gives to us. So I want to share with you about where I'm from. So I mentioned to you that I'm a member of the Yakama Nation. And here we have in purple my reservation, my homeland, where I'm from, where all of my family lives. And we're a large reservation, a large nation, the largest Indigenous nation in the Pacific Northwest. And this map is a way of understanding place. And I'd say that's a typical approach, right, of how we understand place. If we look at a map, where am I? Let me find and put my finger on the dot where I'm from or where I am. And maps also can teach us a lot about how we view the world, how we understand that place. So for example, on most maps, maybe you'll see the reservations, highlighted. On a lot of maps, those still aren't there. But maybe you'll see that. But you'll very rarely see this lavender component. And that lavender component is our traditional homeland that is named in our treaty between the Yakama Nation and the US government. And that represents over 90% of our Indigenous homeland that was taken by force from our people. And when you look at a map with that on there, you understand the importance of movements like land back. You understand how there's violence written on the land, through these borders and boundaries that are drawn. And so I like to remind people of that so that they understand, different narratives of place. We'll continue in this little activity here of looking at this simple map, which, by the way, is from the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, also known as CRIE. And the member nations of CRIE are highlighted here, Yakama Nation and our sister tribes, Warm Springs, Umatilla, and Nez Perce, or Nimipu. And let's go ahead and look at some other features of this map. For example, these white lines here, you're probably familiar with, are the outlines of the states that we now know as Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and so on, as well as this white line here that marks that boundary between what we now call the US and Canada. And again, these are lines that are drawn to create the settler state as part of that theft of land from Indigenous peoples. And so when Indigenous peoples look at a map that features these settler state lines, we're reminded that the settler state is one that is built upon oppression and greed and violence. And that's woven into society, right? All throughout settler society. And that's by design. And that's really a foundational understanding that I want us to, do the rest of our work together today with. And when we consider place from that perspective, we can understand how all these settler governments, whether it's the US government or state government or county government or city government, their institutions, their policies, their practices, they're all built upon that foundation of violence that was designed to eradicate Indigenous peoples and cultures. So when you approach evaluation that interacts in any way with any component of settler society, that's always there as part of that foundation. And that's good to know. It's good to understand that so that you can approach the work with an understanding of place. And a stronger commitment is what I find when I work with clients and students, right? When we understand that, we're able to approach the work differently, to have a humble heart, to have an awareness of, gosh, the stakes are really high to do justice-focused work. And that's such a beautiful beginning to work from. And so I invite you to do that. I'll share, I think, 2 more points about this map and this activity I'm choosing to open with. I want to share how this map portrays an Indigenous perspective with regard to the power of collective. So look at how our homelands touch and connect us with one another. How wonderful. And CRIE itself is an example of that, with these nations choosing to invest resources to have a collective organization that will fight for the rights of our fish relatives. That's a wonderful vision and way of being. And it connects us so that we can see, our people living on our traditional homelands way up here in the north. Yeah, they're connected to folks way out here, right? And so that's a wonderful way of connecting and belonging. Another example of that same logic is we can see this white line here, goes along Uchiwana or the Columbia River. It's often thought of as a border or a separating point between the state of Washington and the state of Oregon. But from an Indigenous perspective, borders are not points of separation or division, they're places of coming together. And what would be possible if we thought of borders as coming together places instead of places that divide, or that we need to use violence to keep those people over there and these people over here, right? And so we see that beautiful logic grounded in Indigenous ways of knowing and being that's available to all of us if we can look at an image and remember that example. All right, one final point from this map. I want to call your attention to this darker tan area. To me, this is the most prominent feature of this map. It goes all over. And do you know what that is? It's the Columbia River Basin. Uchiwana, this one river, she connects all of these people and places. How amazing is that? This one river, one body of water connects all of us. I love pausing and reflecting on that and seeing how my well-being is connected to all of these people. And as we look out the Columbia River and Chihuahua flowing out to the Pacific Ocean, we're also connected to all the people who are connected to the Pacific Ocean. I love that teaching. This one precious, generous body of water can do all of that for us. And so I invite you to consider, what body of water are you connected with? And who are the peoples that connect you through that water? That's a lovely invitation to deepen your relationship with place and with peoples. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little activity to open up as we think about place from an Indigenous perspective. So we have 4 goals for today. Whew, ambitious, but we can do it. We're already doing it. The first one, you probably saw these on Eventbrite when you registered. Decentering white stream ways of thinking and being. I hope we've already done that through our activity and through your sharing in the chat. I saw lots of lovely sharing about where you are at, on whose homelands you are living. Number 2, honoring elders' instructions on how to conduct ourselves in the world in ways that affirm Indigenous ways of knowing and being. I've already done that a little bit, talking about Patu, for example. There she is again in the background of my slide there. Number 3, emphasizing the importance of place and Indigenous homelands and examining resources to support learners. That map is one resource. We'll look at a whole bunch more. I'm excited to share with you. And then finally, this one's a long one. Commit to a journey of doing evaluation as a liberatory practice that honors and supports Indigenous self-determination in all programs and institutions that are built on Indigenous homelands. Whew, that's a long one. Let's break it up. I see 3 pieces. One is that this is a journey. It's ongoing. Tecumseh, Dr. Virginia Biebert, our Yakama elder, she reminds us that we don't know everything. We can't know everything, but we know some things, and we can keep learning. She's now 100 years young and still working with our Subsequent program at the University of Oregon as our distinguished elder educator. And she knows what she's talking about. So we're on this journey. I mentioned the oppression and violence that is inherent in settler society. That's why evaluation as a liberatory practice is so important. Honoring and supporting Indigenous self-determination. I'm inviting you to consider that as the central priority of your work. Because guess what? When we are in right relation with place, we are doing good by Indigenous peoples. And when we do that, when we disrupt that violence and those inequities that are built into settler society, yes, that benefits Indigenous peoples and it benefits all peoples, right? And so when we get in there and transform these institutions and these programs, on the hard days, it can seem like, oh, I'm just trying to make this place a little less oppressive. And guess what? That's a good thing. That's a win. And the more and more of us who do that, we're going to see bigger transformations. And then we'll see right relation with place. Because all these programs and institutions are built on Indigenous homelands. All right, we'll keep moving here. Here's a number of those resources that I was talking about that I wanted to offer to you as examples. I'm not going to do a lot of reading definitions and so forth, because that work is already out there for you to carry forward. And they're lovely resources. We're surrounded by gifts. It's amazing how much work has been done on culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation. And so those gifts are there for you. They've already been given. And so the authors, communities who contributed to those, they want you to pick them up and use them in your work. That's why they created them. And so I'll just go ahead and start off on this first one I'm choosing to share today from Center for Native Child and Family Resilience. Let's see if I can do this here. Can you see my browser there? Can I get a head nod? Yes, awesome, thank you. All right, and so this web page, there's the URL. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can have a copy of my slides. They're up if you want to follow along, if that's simpler for you, on this URL. Let me put it in the chat real quick. I know sometimes you like to download and follow along, so you can do that. Oops. Okay, so here's that first resource that I wanted to just show you so that you can consider when you have more time, go through this. If you work on a team or with an organization, maybe you can take a few minutes every meeting to look at a resource and talk about it. And that's how you build up that knowledge base. That's how it becomes a more central part of your work. And look at this. Beautiful summary points for you. Amazing videos. And then lots of great knowledge just right here for you. Look at this gift. It's already given. Look at this. Already resources from the literature for you to draw from. So that's an amazing resource. I also want to feature the work of the super auntie, culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation, Dr. Nikki Bowman. And so let's go ahead and look at, this is the homepage, bpcwi.com. There it is. There's a beautiful video welcoming you, just a brief greeting. And then lots of resources on this webpage as well. I went ahead and made tiny URLs for my slides just because to make it a little more readable. But a couple of resources I wanted to highlight here and point you to is this resource list. And the point I wanted to cover here is, I know one question that might come up is, what's the difference between CRE, CREE, and CRIE? And it's a good question. To me, that question just feels like, are you trying to like write a multiple choice test? You know, like it doesn't feel like the deeper kind of relational, thoughtful work that I want to see happen with our time together today. So I went ahead and highlighted this to address, that possible question that some of you might have, because Dr. Bowman's already done some great thinking about that and really points us here. She tells us, look, there's all kinds of concepts. They're good. They're contemporary terms. What they're inviting you to do is to be a good relative, right? To be in good relation. And these are all contemporary terms. They're created to try to address this problem, the root problem that we're facing in our society for all these inequities, all these forms of violence, is colonization. All right. And that's where she's pointing your attention. That's where I would like to draw your attention as well. And to that end, I want to share one final resource here. On Dr. Bowman's website, you can get a free download of this lovely document, Emancipation from Colonization Declaration. And I think this is such a beautiful document that could be used in any organization, on any evaluation team. You could just go through and each meeting really dig deep into one section or even one paragraph. You'll get so much out of it. So much that'll invite you to think differently, to grow in ways in which you're able to consider Indigenous ways of knowing and being, to enrich and improve your evaluation practice. All right. And so it's not terribly long, right? So everyone here has time to go through this and to keep engaging this. That's absolutely accessible and a wonderful resource. All right, so I wanted to share those with you. And I wanted to remind us that we're all on this learning journey. Drawing from Tecumseh's words earlier that I shared about we don't know everything, but we know some things. She's reminding us here in her quote from her book, The Gift of Knowledge, Reflections on Sahaptin Ways, that we learn throughout our entire lifetime until the last breath is taken from the body. And that's such a wonderful reminder of, I can keep going. I can keep growing, which is what we want, right? I'll share too that this book, where this quote comes from Tecumseh, that's based on her dissertation. Tecumseh really models what she says is important, like all our wise elders do. And she says, you know what? Learning is important. And guess what? In her 80s, she's now 100, as I told you, but in her 80s, way back 20 years ago, she went back to school to get her PhD in linguistics. And then she wrote that dissertation, and then University of Washington published her book. You can buy it if you want. It's an amazing book. And so I love reminding people of how much wisdom and power and strength there are in Indigenous communities, as there has been since time immemorial, as our elders instruct. And I put this picture on here. That's in Chihuahua, Columbia River, because she's that powerful river who connects so many of us, as I shared on my first slide. All right, at this time in the presentation, I usually start worrying that I've talked too much and I've gone too slow. And I love to remember an Indigenous perspective of time that I write about in my book, Fox Doesn't Wear a Watch, and how our elders remind us the importance of being in time rather than on time. And this is our calendar, a beautiful illustration of our calendar that we use in our culture. And we know what season it is based on the wisdom of our more than human relations. They let us know when it's time to gather. They decide when it's time to fish. They decide when it's time to harvest. And so it's a beautiful teaching about patience, acceptance, and humility. When you live by the seasonal round, if you're a hunter, gatherer, fisher person in any regard, you learn really quickly. Humans are not the center of everything. We are not the most important. We are, in the teachings of my people, we're pitiful beings who depend upon the generosity of our more than human relations. And so I would encourage you, those of you who are starting to think about engaging Indigenous peoples in your evaluation practice or deepening your engagement, learn about what traditional foods are important to your local people that you want to work with. Because for our people anyway, if there's somebody from the outside wanting to come into the community, but they haven't taken the time to learn anything about what's important to us, it's hard to not feel like they're just there to take, or they're there for themselves, right? Just like any community that's important to you to enter, you want to prepare in a good way. And so that's a helpful tip, hopefully, for you. All right, I wanted to read one story to you from my book, Huckleberries and Coyotes, and just invite you to be a part of the story, to meet the story with whatever energy and experiences you've had today. Even if you've heard the story before, I'm going to read I Love Weaving Huckleberry. You're different today than when you heard it last time. And so that's part of that reflective process that Dr. Joanne Archibald, a Stola elder, calls being story ready. That you are fully ready to participate. You are responsible in our Indigenous storytelling tradition. Like, it's not just the storyteller doing the work, the listeners are doing just as much work to open your heart and your mind and to be ready to receive whatever gift it is that you're going to receive from this story that you can carry forward. All right. And so if you're not familiar, I encourage you to check out Dr. Archibald's website, Indigenous Storywork. It's a beautiful resource This is the page. It's for educators. And there are lovely videos here, a summary. You can buy Dr. Archibald's book. It's an amazing resource. Here's her 7 principles that she names. And again, on your team or with your program or organization, you could go through and look at one page or one video each meeting and look how much you'll learn and benefit from that. All right, so let me go ahead and get ready to read you the story. I love Weavenu. Huckleberry. I love Weavenu. She's sweet and petite and just a bit tart, kind of like Auntie. I remember Auntie praying over us and offering a blessing before we went Weavenu picking at the lake up at the base of Patsu, Mount Adams, in our gorgeous Cascade Mountains. Auntie was already an elder with gray hair neatly permed and set under a headscarf, but she was strong and determined and could thrive on that hill beside the lake, just like Weavenu. I remember Auntie taking her basket and climbing up that hill so high she was just a dot. Look at her, she's like a mountain goat, Dad said, while puffing on his cigar, taking a short break from fishing. He stood and watched her climb farther up, and then Dad turned and effortlessly threw another cast into the lake, his fishing reel spinning zzz with delight, bobber almost instantly signaling another rainbow trout. Cool. I had helped Auntie pick Weavenu in the easy-to-reach bushes lower down by the lake. It was hard to get comfortable crouching in place, picking just the right purple berries. No stems or leaves, please. We only want the berries. A tremendous effort of skill, but mostly patience. It seemed like forever before I was able to fill the bottom layer of my basket. This was just a few handfuls of ripe berries, a quantity I could easily eat in about 1.5 seconds. Auntie encouraged me, though, and complimented me on the lack of leaves and stem in my basket. Those will be easy to clean and use later, she reminded me. We all knew the tedious task of cleaning berries from a sloppy picker, the slow work of finding and removing all the stem and leaf debris. How quickly we like to condemn such a picker as immoral, thoughtless, selfish, in a hurry, some of the most vicious insults we could think of. No, Auntie would intervene. You must think kind and good thoughts when you're handling our sacred foods. Weavenu is your sister. You're harming her if you say harsh things or hold bad feelings around her. Yes, Auntie, I'm sorry. We'd quickly get back on track, stepping into our better selves. Of course, most of the berries were easy to clean, as they'd come from Auntie's huge berry basket she repeatedly filled. Gallons and gallons of berries. Her many decades of practice picking huckleberries made her a true expert. Yet she always had patience, encouragement, and kind words for beginners who struggled to fill even the smallest basket or bag. Auntie's lessons stay with us. Her spirit soars like the eagle gliding near the hills where she used to pick Weavenu. Every time I taste Weavenu, I remember her, sweet, petite, and just a bit tart. I love my Auntie, and I love Weavenu. I'd like to pause now and invite you to, if you have a piece of paper nearby, or you can type it in the chat. What are you thinking about after that story? What pulls at your attention, either from the story, or it provokes a memory or a teaching that you want to pay attention to? What is on your mind or in your heart after that story? Please write yourself a note or type in the chat if you're willing for other folks to see that. I put a few things that arise for me in the story, You can see that on the slides and the bullet points. And for me, any evaluation project needs to account for these points. That's something that I carry with me from the teachings of my auntie that I just shared, but in my ongoing work with elders. They teach me that when I engage in some kind of knowledge creation or knowledge seeking process, these are things that they expect to be part of that. And it's a nice list to refer back to, right? Where I can assess, how am I doing on this? Am I a little weaker on one or more of these than I would like to be? Where am I feeling like, oh, I'm just flying along with that one, so good? You know, it's a nice way to check in. Ooh, I see there's lots of things in the chat. I'm going to resist the urge to look at them right now. I'll look at them here in a moment because I know my time is wrapping up a little bit. There's Weavenu. If you're not familiar, huckleberries, a smaller, darker, tartar version of blueberries is how I've heard her described. And so we're kind of getting to the point where we're wrapping up here. And so I just want to give a kind reminder that learning is a process. And guess what? We can learn and keep growing and changing every day. And that's what we're instructed to do in the traditions that I know. And so I posed some questions here for you. What do you want more of and less of in your evaluation work? How do you want to feel in your work as an evaluator? How do you want to be? So I invite you to jot down in your notes. You can, if you feel like sharing with a broader audience, type it in the chat. Sometimes when you share, you give somebody just the encouragement or modeling that they need. I love to remind people I work with, yes, when you share, it's a gift to you because you get to articulate something that is emerging for you. And we get to learn from it. How wonderful. All right. So as we wrap up, then I'll just quickly revisit our goals we set for today. Well, let's be honest, I set the goals for today. I hope that you enjoyed working through these. And I hope your experience was that we just decentered white stream ways of thinking and being. We got to enjoy some elder teachings and learn about how that can look. Big emphasis on the importance of place and some resources so that we can be in good relation with Indigenous homeland and peoples. And an understanding that this is a journey that we're on. And we're working toward evaluation as a liberatory practice, or strengthening our ability to do evaluation as a liberatory practice, honoring and supporting Indigenous self-determination, and that we're on Indigenous homelands. Oh no, I'm frozen. All right, so with that, I'll say thank you everyone for being here, for your kind presence and participation. As I mentioned, the slides are on my website. If you want to download a copy, you're welcome to do that. You can connect with me. I have a blog as well. And look at my beautiful books that Crystal did the artwork for. And if you buy a book, the author royalties go to our subsequent program to support the next generation of K-12 educators, Indigenous students training to be teachers in Indigenous communities. So, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. It was a pleasure hearing your thoughts and getting your perspective on evaluation, and particularly we've entered into, I suppose, the second portion of today's events, where ETB has a question or two to ask of you, and then we'll open it up to the audience. But and Nancy is will just share in the chat here just things to carry forward, the questions prompted at the start. What will you carry forward with you from this presentation, and what insights might you apply from today's conversation in your own work? I already see the chat is buzzing, so appreciate that. But Michelle, I had a question, and you touched upon this a little bit in your presentation already. But initially, when our team started discussing the differences between the culturally responsive equitable evaluation and the culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation approach, we didn't immediately see the differences. And I think that's because we hadn't decentered that sort of white stream way of thinking. And I know that part of your presentation, you centered that as not necessarily a fruitful approach to thinking through things, but because it's sort of a different way of thinking for some folks, I wonder, is there a common misconception that comes up around culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation or practice that perhaps people sort of stumble into? I'm curious if that's something you've encountered.
I would say that what I would love to remind people of is the importance of place, the history of that place. And history, not like, oh, that was the past, but history as it is today. And to have that humility to understand there are deep knowledges in that place already, as there has always been, right? And so I think that's one reason why I kind of avoid, this entanglement with this definition of this term, and that definition of that term. Because when you look at it from an Indigenous perspective, those are so new. They're little teeny tiny baby terms, and you've got this tremendous legacy of knowledge, including evaluation. Indigenous peoples have been evaluating, in our homelands since time immemorial, right? I mean, this is not like outsiders thought of evaluation and brought it, that's that's not a good way to approach it, right? And so, yeah, I always encourage people to come back to, and when I talked with the ETB team about what's today going to look like, I said, I want to get back to basics. And that's what I meant. Like, where are you? Where do you work, right? This is the title of today's gathering, to remind people about the power and importance of place.
I was curious, and this will be sort of our last team question, and then we'll get into what people have been mentioning in the chat. I'm curious about things that maybe evaluators should consider when reaching out to Indigenous peoples or tribal organizations, in order to avoid being extractive or harmful in their approach. And you touched upon this somewhat in your presentation, but I'd love to touch upon it again.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's an important question. It's a question that even Indigenous evaluators, like, we got to ask that question too, and be truthful and honest with that question too. And I would always advise folks that it's a question for yourself, right? Like, why do you want to approach these folks? What exactly are you asking for? And why are you asking for that? And what are you bringing? Right? Because if you're not clear on what you're bringing, if you're not clear on how the community is going to benefit in a tangible way, by definition, you're going to be extractive, right? Because you're there for your own benefit and gain, or to get something, and satisfying one's curiosity, that's extractive too, oftentimes, right? Well, I just want to know about this, or tell me about that. It's like, all right, well, what are you bringing? Do you have any thoughts to offer on this? And when we talked about how today would go, that was something that, I believe I brought up, when I do a lot of speaking and so forth. And it's always hard when there's like, just a bunch of questions that come at me without folks giving something in that process. And so that's why I always love to invite comments and questions, because I'm not the only one with knowledge here, number one, right? Folks can share things, folks know things. But it also just models that, we're here to be in relation, right? We're going to model in some way a reciprocity. And so I love these fabulous, generous comments in the chat.
Yeah.
So much wisdom here. Love it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Michelle. Yes, thank you so much. And that sort of, it just struck to me as well from your reading from Huckleberries and Coyotes. You mentioned how when you conduct yourself, how you feel and how you approach those situations, that those feelings matter, and it impacts even the foundational relationships and how later evaluations can build from that. So I appreciate you sharing that, and so pleased that you're in this space, and hopefully we can learn together. And as you mentioned, yes, the comments here, wonderful insights. Now just a reminder, in the last 15 minutes or so, please share any thoughts that you may have, or comments, questions, elements that we might be able to bring and ask of each other.
I want to go through, feel free, anybody can jump in, like raise your hand if you're like, quit talking, I want to talk. That's fine, But sure. I think something I love is, and I think I annoyed the ETV team a little bit, maybe, because I think the ETV culture is like they want to plan everything down to the minute. And I understand that. It's good, it's organized, it's professional. We've all been trained to think that way. And it completely shuts down the possibilities for me to point to the brilliance, for example, which I'm going to do it now because I do things my way, of Corvus Lloyd. And please correct me if I'm saying your name incorrectly, because I want to learn and be respectful. But look at this comment. It was at 140 in the chat if you want to read along. And Corvus shares, I want to remember how to just sit and listen to nature. There's so much wisdom there. And indeed, to Chamshish, when we teach together, I get to co-teach with my elder. Isn't that wonderful? And guess what? University didn't just make that happen. They didn't give me that opportunity. My colleague, Dr. Leilani Sabzalian, who's the co-director alongside myself for our subsequent lab program, we had to create that position for Techamshish. There was no distinguished elder educator. We had to create the position. We had to fund the position with grants that we went out and got. But now guess what? It's part of the structure. Yay! So that's an example, right, of getting in there and making that space and creating liberatory practices within our everyday work. And so guess what? What I want to share is Techamshish, when we teach together, she reminds our students, go outside, be quiet, pay attention. She never says, read 200 pages tonight, send 50 emails. She never says that. And so she's drawing off her 100 years of experience and the deep knowledge in our culture and language to advise students about the power, the knowledge, the wisdom. You need to connect with place in order to really access that. Now I got to tell you about that and share that with you. Another beautiful teaching from our elder because of the comment that Corvus generally made, generously made there. So thank you, Corvus. Do you mind if I just cruise through the comments?
No, that would be fantastic. I was about to say, please, I would love that.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Berry picking. You learn so much berry picking, don't you? Yeah, absolutely. How to slow down and do one thing. That's so valuable. But yet, look at how much our like funding mechanisms and even our programs and institutional cultures, they push us to forget to do that. And so that's a place where you can choose. And we can feel it, right? In our bodies, in our moods, when we're being pushed to do too much too soon. Our bodies are wise. They know that maybe you can do that for a little bit, but you're going to have some physical effects if you keep doing that, right? And so to go back to that wisdom that perhaps you learned as a child, picking a berry. There's so much there, that awareness, there's the right berry. And then reaching for that one berry and grabbing, not squishing it, right? Or hopefully not squishing the berry. And then you eating or putting it in a basket, right? So much intention and care. And a pace that works for you and for the berry. No, go ahead, E. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that I'm so struck by that urgency that's sort of false that we so often put on ourselves, and whether it's evaluation or just in our daily lives, we don't necessarily need to get away from that wisdom that you mentioned we learn as beings in this world. Just wanted to share.
Thank you for that sharing. Yeah, and I love your comment because you're reminding us we hold that wisdom. If we're willing to we got to slow down to remember that, right? Yeah. Yeah. Nancy Vang sharing in the chat at 136. Thinking of elders in my own life, I look to for guidance and knowledge. Yep. Yeah. So many institutions, programs, opportunities are structured like without that. Like the importance of elders as wisdom and knowledge keepers, it is not even in there. Gosh, what a mistake. What a missing out, right? Our group here today, we can remember that and we can carry that forward. See, L. Ford is commenting about being a gardener. Yeah, gardeners learn so much tending the earth, Mother Earth, and all beings that you choose to keep in your garden. Patience, slowness, the decentering of our, human imagined timelines. Yeah, compassion. Great. All right, I'm missing the newer chat comments. Yes, the garden. Blueberries. I'm glad to see berries are getting so much love. All right. Let's open it up. Maybe if anyone wants to raise a hand. We have a few minutes left.
Absolutely.
Share a comment or ask a question.
I wonder if you saw this one, Michelle, by Angel, who mentioned that he was reminded that when we're younger, our learning is so centered around feelings and emotions. We feel pain when we touch something we shouldn't. We learn to eat foods that are tasty and bring emotions. But when we get older, you've been programmed to listen less to these emotions, including emotions, how may impact rigor in traditional forms of evaluation, as if somehow emotion is making it less valid. I just thought that was quite a powerful thought. Thought I'd share it.
Yes, so great. Rigor. That poor word. I laugh because that word has been used as a weapon, right, against so many peoples, and that's hard, right? And it's been rigor has been a word that has been defined from such a narrow perspective in so many cases, and has been used to justify the exclusion of so many ways of knowing and being. And that's that foundation of violence and inequity that I was talking about in the presentation, is being interwoven throughout settler society. And when we understand that, we see how breaking that way of thinking open, considering other perspectives, critical perspectives, from many different approaches, not just Indigenous. We all benefit when that happens, because it means there are so many greater possibilities for all of us. That way it's just open, and we're allowed to come in and share and grow and thrive, rather than this really narrow, teeny tiny, slice where it's like, can you fit in this rigorous thing or not? And it's like, that's such a bad model. Yeah, so thank you so much for raising that. All right. Anybody feel the urge to raise your hand and say something? Got about 2 more minutes before I want to, or am I doing the closing, or?
I'll do a quick wrap up, but if you have any messages, absolutely welcome, Michelle.
Okay, yeah, I'll share one thing to close. And just give another invitation if anybody wants to. I'm probably not going to be able to scroll through the chat anymore at this time, but you can post another comment or raise your hand and come on. We've got about 2 more minutes. Whatever you'd like to share or ask.
I see Corvus shared a chat here about wanting to learn more about ancestors and their teachings, but is hampered by not knowing all the history or even who or what they were. And there's a missing chunk of that history that they've spent their life feeling unmoored, always looking for history. And then they say, can you adopt me? LOL.
Well, we are in relation now, right? Because you chose to attend this, and we got to spend this time together. But I would say, you're always in a place, and so you can connect more meaningfully with that place and with that history there, that for a variety of reasons you've ended up where you are now. Great. So see what rich experiences and knowledges unfold for you there. Yeah. And then how can you be of service to Indigenous peoples who are local to that place, on whose homelands you're on, right? That is the super meaningful experience that I want to encourage folks to go after. And I model that. I'm a professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Oregon. And so the program I co-direct, our Subsequent Love program, we operate it as a consortium with the 9 federally recognized tribal nations in what's now called the state of Oregon. And so we're a university program. We can do whatever we want, right? Dr. Sibzali and I, we're in charge. But you know what? That's such a limiting possibility if it's just the 2 of us, right? And so we open it up and share power and make all the important program decisions through a consensus process with the tribal education leaders that are designated by their tribes to be on our tribal advisory council. And look at that, it then becomes a state institution that shares decision-making power, including over funding, with tribal nations on whose homeland that institution sits. And so that's an example of how I could be in good relation as somebody who works for a state institution, right? To leverage my position and the resources of the institution to serve tribal nations. And in doing so, strengthen tribal sovereignty and self-determination. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. I deeply appreciate your thoughts and your presentation. And unfortunately, we are limited by the time here, but I know you mentioned you wanted to share something to close out, so I'd love to open the floor for you to do that now.
All right. Well, we've given a lot of love to our berry relatives. And I'll go ahead and share maybe in that vein here. This is a quote from Anahuy. The book title is here. That's our people's most famous collection of traditional Yakama stories that our people have held, our elders have passed on through generations and generations. And I had the honor of co-editing the second edition that just came out from University of Washington Press last year with Tecumseh, Dr. Virginia Beaver, and a non-native linguist, Dr. Joanna Jansen, who has dedicated her life and work to serving Indigenous peoples. And so this is the quote I chose to wrap up here. Humans are humble creatures who only exist in our region today because other beings permitted this to be so. And so it's a kind reminder of just our deep responsibility and gratitude toward our more than human relations. So I just want to thank you all for your time, for your participation, for your contributions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And just a few words from us to close off. It was such a pleasure to just be in the same space, Shell, to connect with you and everybody on this call. Nancy has dropped in the chat also a form for an evaluation of our own, a small one. We hope one in 2023 that maybe we could explore a series of events like these. And so we're always looking to for topics and potential ideas. So that will be emailed to you as well if you're interested in receiving that, as well as the list of a lot of the resources and links that we shared in the chat today. So please do not worry if you missed some of those wonderful links. And I'd love to thank you all for your time, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and consider what you learned here. Thank you.